right, so the book I just finished is Lois Lowry's Gathering Blue. This is the second book in the Giver series. This one is definitely not as closely related to the other stories, or at least the original Giver story, as I think the idea of it being a series kind of leads on. I think there's a very brief mention at the very end of this, which is where, oh God, what's his name from The Giver? Don't remember his name, but where it's mentioned who that character is, which I think is really how this all kind of ties together. But Gathering Blue, I think, explores kind of the same world in which society has fallen apart, society has crumbled, and there's a whole bunch of very small communities that are basically gathering their way into figuring out how they are going to survive. And in The Giver, it's about making sure everyone gets the same kind of life and there are no decisions to be made and everything's fine. This one is about basically forcing people into feudalism, which is really interesting. And basically anyone who is talented in the arts gets captured or given a better place to live, but is kind of enslaved there or is trapped there with no way out. But yeah, it's an interesting idea. I think it's a nice commentary on the arts and how we as society view them, because the arts are not considered useful in a lot of ways. I know, as me 14-year-old self was very much adamant that the arts don't do anything. And yet at the same time that the arts are, the people who are very good at the arts are the most treasured people in the world. And it kind of goes the same with the characters that are in Gathering Blue. Yeah, I think maybe the most interesting thing about this is I think there's also commentary on government here, which is really interesting. Basically about how it's forcing people into one line of thinking and who they are and what that means, and then using artists to impose that story, which then in turn puts that story onto everyone else. In this novel, it's kind of basically about about how no one should leave the village and how the woods are dangerous, things like that, and they impose that by talking about beasts that are never actually really there. The beasts are never actually really there. It's just people pretending to be beasts, but it helps scare the citizens into never leaving, and therefore believing that this is the only life that they can have. This is really interesting. This book also touches a lot about like usefulness and things like that, about what that actually means. What does it mean to be a productive member of society? And as the book kind of shows, the people who are the most productive in society are not always the people who are the most cherished in society, until they are given a special place in the world. Yeah. I'm not really a big fan of this book, I guess, just because it feels really kind of setting up for a sequel. The way that this book ends, really most of it's like setting up the rest of the universe that The Giver is in, and then the last a couple chapters are really about setting up the sequel to this, which is called Messenger. I'm actually looking at the other book right now, and I assume that Messenger will have a much better, maybe more in-depth actual storyline to it. Um, but yeah, that's that. I don't feel like I give this book a very high rating. Maybe I don't know. What did I give The Giver? I think I gave The Giver a pretty high rating. This one I think I gave like a 4.5 to a 5. It's an easy read, but I just don't think it is. It's not as teachable as The Giver, and it's very clearly setting up for a sequel, and it's very, or at least the ending very kind of clearly sets up for the sequel, and it's a fine enough standalone book, but it's definitely, it will probably get hidden amongst the rest of the novels with the Giver series. So that's that. That's my thoughts. Yeah, I don't think there's much to really say on Gathering Blue. I think it's still a really nice book, but I don't think there's a lot of substance there. So hopefully the next one will have the rest of that substance, and then maybe I'll just go, you know what, these two books probably should have just been together with like a time jump in the middle. It is what it is.